Hi all, I'm Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. And in this video, I'm going to show you 22 karat gold granulation. These pieces will eventually be made into some gorgeous earrings. I know high karat gold granulation makes a lot of people nervous because it really does take a huge amount of heat. But learn along with me and before you know it, you'll be granulating away. Okay, we're going to try it again, but this time I'm extra super sure that my glue is dry. So you pick it up, keeping it nice and level. Sit it on a nice hot spot and let go. Let the glue burn off. You see how it gets like a little dark. And I usually just wait, like, you know, give it a 30 seconds or whatever for the glue to burn off. And then I'm going to start heating the whole piece. So as I'm sure I've told you before about granulation, we're going to get the whole piece really good and hot. I'm going to hold my flame straight up and down and circle the piece. I'm going to wait for that sort of hazy finish to disappear. And then when my connections are glowing really bright and orangey and marigold color, then we are going to granulate. So I'm using a #1 tip, which is nice and big, and you want to use a nice soft flame, poofy, like that. You don't want to, like, you know, none of that, like what you use when you're soldering. Okay, use a lid to cast a shadow. So you see that hazy surface that's still happening there? We're going to keep heating, flame straight up and down until that disappears, because that's basically like an indicator. If you've still got haze, your piece is not hot enough to granulate. Okay, you see how my haze is slowly but surely disappearing. Okay, and then watch what happens. Because you'll start to see basically the places where the granules are touching the back sheet starts to glow brighter than everything else. Yes, there we go. Okay, now when you granulate, it's almost like a waltz. You can only keep in one section at that fusing temperature for about a count of 3. So in other words, build the heat back up just a little tiny bit. Okay, so then watch. 1, 2, 3. You see, I just work a little section. And you can see the little necks forming, or I can see the little necks forming. Nope, that should be it. So I'm going to take it out and let it cool. Usually what I do then is I look at it under a magnifier and try to really look for all those little connections. And if there's any space that, like, I don't see connections and I really feel iffy about, I'm not going to start picking at them. I'm going to just put it back in the kiln and fuse a little bit more. I feel like I only really use my fingernail and start picking at my granules once I feel really sure that they actually won't come off. Because if I start picking at them and they come off, I mean, that's fine, but I've got to, like, clean the whole thing and get everything set up again and glue again and whatever. And if I see a spot that really doesn't look promising, it's better for me to just go ahead and put it back in a kiln. And I'll give you a little close-up of what this looks like. Okay, so there it is out of the kiln. It's a little oxidized, you know, so I'll pickle it so that you can see it a little bit better. And, you know, some of my little tiny granules kind of gathered together so you can see a little bit of negative space in a couple spots. I'll probably stick a few more little granules in there, but it looks pretty good. I'll pickle it and try to, like, show you some of the connection points. So it's pretty tricky to show this, but what I'm trying to point out here is that underneath each of these granules is a little attachment or a little neck of metal. I'll try to point that stinker out. See that? Under each granule, right there, there's like a little neck of metal. Maybe I'll throw it in the pickle and that'll make it a little easier to see. But, you know, a part of what makes granulation tricky is it's not so easy to see what's actually happening all the time. So trying to show it very, very close up. There you go. Hopefully you can see those little necks. Okay, I'm gonna put the naughty one back in the kiln. I have dried for like ever and ever. So in theory, it should be dry. Excellent. So you see the glue starts to burn off a little bit. We use a nice poofy tip, like so. Ooh, sounds like the popo is here. Okay, elbow up in the air, flame straight up and down. Using the lid to kind of cast a shadow and help to build the heat up a bit. And basically the darker it is, the easier it is to see everything. Okay, so you see how there's still that haze on the surface. So I'm gonna kind of just keep heating until that goes away. It's like I was saying before, if you've got haze, you're not hot enough to fuse. Okay, see how the haze is kind of receded. Keep going. There you go. That's the moment right there. You see how all the connections are glowing really brightly and the haze is gone. So now I'll go in there and kind of give it a little bath like that. Beautiful. Okay, I'll take it out and we'll check it, but that looks pretty good. So there it is, fresh out of the kiln. And you see it's a little bit oxidized, but not too much. Everything looks good, but I'll throw it in the pickle and I'll start, checking for all the connections. We'll see what we've got. Because it's definitely not shocking or unheard of to, have to put it back in or stick a granule in a spot or whatever. I mean, sometimes I put it in and everything goes the first time and that's it, but it's definitely not uncommon to have to go back in a little bit more. And sometimes it's better to take it out, see what it looks like, rather than really go for the gusto to the point where, oops, we went too far. So I'll show it to you after it's pickled. Okay, so you ready? Mm-hmm. So I'm just gonna start off this video by saying that I got my head stuck in an x-ray machine today and it was very traumatic. So I'm just going to say that whatever happens today, the fact that I lived is a win.
Hopefully there's no brain damage.
Permanent brain. I'm in the room and I'm like, help! Because it caught in my thing and it's like pulling.
Oh my God.
It was just at the dentist, but okay.
That can be treacherous.
So there.
You're here.
Shake it out. I'm here.
Yeah.
So late last night, fused all the wires in place, fused the granules, everything looked great. But if you ever notice, whenever you're trying to fill a space with granules, after you dry the water off completely and actually put it in the kiln, lovely.
Yeah.
You'll notice that you have more space than you thought. I feel like when you set them up with water, they seem to fill the space a little better. And then after you fuse them, you're like, oh, a little more space. You're never gonna fill those spaces completely. It's just, if you think about the math involved, it's just not possible. So you're gonna have little spaces and that's okay. But I did have one section right there that I shoved another 2 little tiny granules in just to, it was a little too big of a space. Because you see what I mean. There's little spaces here and there, and no one's granulation, when you really get close, fills things perfectly. That's not really a thing. So you just try to get it as lovely as you can, and that's that. So basically, I just shoved a couple granules in there. Everything else looks like it's really nice and done. I'm gonna put that in the kiln. I'm gonna fuse it, and then I'll really go through and check and make sure everything has connections. I'll also do my patented, put it in the magnetic tumbler. I'll show you how to do that too, because it's great for granulation. It's amazing and game changing. But okay, so I've got a super hot kiln here. Look at that. And I actually didn't bother to glue the granules because there's kind of no place that they can go. They just kind of fit right in there. Okay, and as always, when you granulate, flame is going to be straight up and down. I'm going to circle the whole piece and build up the heat and build up the heat. Like first you'll see kind of like a haze, then the haze disappears, and then you'll see wherever there's like contact points, it gets that really bright marigold orange, and that's what you're looking for. As soon as you see that temperature, which I will yell out when I see it in there, that's when you can really go in there and fuse. And usually I do little like swirls, and just remember you can't stay on a section that's in fusing mode for more than about a count of 3. Okay? So in other words, if I'm on that section, I'm heating and I'm fusing, I might just be like 1, 2, 3, and then the next section, and then you know what I mean? You don't have to stop heating the whole piece, but you can't just sit on a section for longer than about a count of 3 when you're at that temperature, or else things will go. Okay? So number 1 tip, we want like a soft, poofy flame. There we go. Use the lid to cast a shadow. Ooh, oh, hold on. Operator error.
I feel like that torch, it's fine, and then when you turn it down, it loses.
Let me turn it up and then.
Yeah. Like what is that?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. But
Maybe
okay,
the
so
hose
there you
is
go.
pinching.
So you see how there's that like haze on the surface? Okay, so you keep heating, and you'll notice as the temperature gets higher, that haze starts to disappear. You see how there's less and less of it as I go? Okay, haze has disappeared. And you notice that area in the top where I put the new granules? You see how it's brighter than the other areas? Okay, so there we go. Now we're at temperature, which is like, you see that? That's like, to me, that's like marigold color. And you see that? We can just kind of, and I'm going to go through the whole thing just for giggles because, you know, who knows, maybe there's a little tiny granule here or there that doesn't have a great connection. But you see how, like, I don't stay there? Okay, so I'm sure that's done now, but boop. Okay, take it out, let it cool. I'll pickle it, I'll look at it. Once I feel very confident that nothing's going to come off, then I'll test it in the magnetic tumbler. See? So with any luck, they're all attached now. Because it's hard, see, when you have like a row of granules like here, like on the outside, these are easy to tell because once you take this, at least, and put it under the magnifier, you can clearly see the, you know, is there a little neck, a little attachment between the back sheet and the granule, or isn't there? I mean, I'm not saying it's not small, but I mean, it is visible if under magnification. But when you have stuff like this that's enclosed, it can be very tricky because even though it has connections to each other, it doesn't necessarily mean you have them to the back sheet. So so that's why it's a little, that's why I started using the magnetic tumbler actually, to really like, because if they're gonna come out, I want them to come out now. Because it's no big deal. Like, let's say I put this in the magnetic tumbler and I lost a couple granules. Yeah, big deal. Put a couple back on there, glue them in place, put it back in the kiln and fuse. It only becomes really like an issue if you're like way later in the project and you're setting your stone or you're soldering your bale on and then granules are coming off, that it's again fixable, but you have to solder them in place and just things can get way more fussy. So always remember, basically, like the earlier you can solve your problems, the better off you'll be. So, okay, so I'm gonna pickle it, blah, blah, and there you go. So that's, so just to show you an extreme close-up, you see all those little attachments that basically underneath each granule, to me it looks like a little neck, is a little attachment of metal. I'll show you. You see what I mean? Right under each granule, there's that little neck. And it basically, if I move this around the piece, I mean, this is easier to do when you're just like under a magnifier, but I'm trying to do it with my macro lens. You see what I mean? You can just go around and see that I've got a beautiful little connection under each granule. Now, for the granules that are inside the wires here, I can see, I'll show you from the top, I can see that there's little attachments to each other, and all indicators that would tell me that they are indeed fused down, because you can see the little attachments between the little granules and the wire. Sorry, this is tough to show. Right there, you can see it. So I have every visual indicator that tells me that everything is done and everything's in place. And I don't have to worry about the wires, because I fused the wires in place before I did the granulation, because it's very helpful to have sort of your skeleton, if you will, in place. Otherwise, when you try to lay out your granules, the wires move, and every time you fix one thing, something else moves, and it's extremely annoying. So normally I fuse all my wires in place first and then granulate. So everything that I see here tells me that everything is beautiful and fused down and together. However, I do usually one other preliminary step before I just say, okay, yes, everything's done, everything's fine, and go on with my project. And this is just the view from one of the other sides. So, at the beginning, one of the especially tricky things about learning to granulate is you don't really know what you're looking for, but that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that little neck of metal, that little attachment that forms between the granule and the back sheet. So take a good long look at it, because if you granulate, you'll be looking for that for the rest of your life, basically.